I was talking to our chief strategy officer last week on this topic of resonance. And one of the things, getting back to your sea of gray, one of the fail points I think that marketers fall into is when you're building ideas, not having a specific segment of audience in mind. And let me give you an example. So if I'm marketing to CFOs, I'm like, hey, my audience is CFOs. That's really hard to create a resonant message because the audience is too broad. If instead I'm looking at growth-minded CFOs who are now under pressure to be profitable where they never have, they're looking at how AI influences their business. And oh, by the way, they still want to grow. Like building an experience when I pick a segment of the market and focus on the psychographics is so much easier to say, oh, I know how to help that person. So when you're building structures and stories, how specific do you get with audience segmentation and what is the role of that in storytelling?
So it's a catch-22 a bit because it's like, we need to focus on our audience, but we also need to deeply resonate with that audience. And therefore we can't craft messaging, stories, experiences, content. I can't show up on a podcast or a stage carrying a message I don't believe in or care about. Also, it needs to be something that could only come from us because we want them to pick us. So there's like this bifurcation you see of what I would call inside out versus outside in thinking. Outside in thinking says, what works on that channel? I'll do that. What do they want to hear? I'll say that. Inside out thinking says, what do I have to say? And by the way, it's really difficult to do either. But the difficulties, this is something I got early in my career when vetting companies or jobs. You're shoveling a pile of dirt, no matter what job you have or how fancy the brand is. And I've worked for like awarded companies that are like best places to work, Google, HubSpot, etc. Clients of mine, Salesforce, Wistia, GoDaddy, also awarded. Everybody has messiness inside their businesses. So it's what pile of dirt are you happier shoveling? So that's what I'm saying here. If you're an outside-in communicator or thinker, you necessarily are going to act like everybody else because you're looking at the market, you're looking at what they're clicking on or thinking about or researching or searching for, and then you're just pandering to that. So what happens is you start looking and sounding like a commodity, and the only way to win as a commodity is you have to be first. So I have to rank higher than my competitors. I have to shout louder, hype harder, have more followers. I have to pitch more, etc. So it's an exhausting effort-based approach to marketing to be an outside-in thinker, communicator, maybe storyteller. Very little of what you do is defensible. So if you're like, we have the budget, we have the speed, we have the brute force, be an outside-in thinker. Inside out is my preference. It's where I start on my clients, and it's who I am as a person, which says not what would they want me to say, but what do I have to say about this? And it starts not with the volume of your content, it starts with the impact of your ideas. And can you sharpen your idea and develop a premise, this big idea that you want to own in people's minds? Because you can't own an audience, despite what you've heard. You can't own an audience, but you can own an idea in their mind. So what is that idea? It's not a keyword. It's not a topic. That's all been commodified. It's your insightful reframe on a familiar topic. So James Clear writes about habits in Atomic Habits. His reframe, because that's a very common topic to write about, his reframe is you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Or a friend of mine, Michelle Warner, who's a business model designer and strategist for small businesses. Michelle is ultimately could be put on a spreadsheet with her peers when vetted by clients, and that's a race to the bottom. You kind of win on price or fame, I guess. But Michelle says, to develop the strategy that's right for you, you need to be the kind of person as a small business owner or an entrepreneur who raises their hand and says, I don't have the answers, but I'm moving forward anyway. In other words, she distills that into her premise, think sequence over strategy. Knowing the next right move is more important than knowing all the moves. And so she attacks the pristine playbooks and blueprints. She attacks the need to know the answers in theory before you act. And she rewards action to find answers and knowing the next right move. And it informs her podcast called Sequence Over Strategy. It informs her evangelism when she's on a podcast as a guest or writes her newsletter. Like everything Michelle does is not just to teach better business strategy and business model design. It's to evangelize and embody the premise of Sequence Over Strategy. That's inside out thinking. She is saying to the world, you care about this topic. And instead of me just pummeling you with more generic advice about that topic, an outside in approach, I'm going to be inside out. I have something distinct to say, And I've done the hard work. Again, the pile of dirt you're comfortable shoveling. The hard work for an inside out thinker is, how do I get them to see what I see? What are all the stories and frameworks? How do I turn expertise, which is where the outside in thinker stops sharing expertise, but the inside out thinker goes, how do I turn my expertise into brand IP? We have a proprietary method and a bunch of frameworks. We have signature stories. We have a message that is so crisp and memorable. We have little turns of phrases or terms we define that you remember. We have actual repeatable IP, intellectual property. Like, you suck out all the goodness from a big concept best-selling business book, all you're left with is the IP. And then you create a whole platform of thought leadership using your IP. So the inside out thinker says, it's going to be harder because I'm not just pandering. What are the things I need to say and do and create to get them to see what I see? But once I do that, I am in pole position to win their business. I can charge a premium for what I'm doing. I will be highly sought and highly referred because everything I'm doing is memorable. And more importantly to my success, defensible. The outside in thinker goes, I guess I'm going to be the winner among all the others like me running on the hamster wheel.